Hello and welcome to Radically Distinct Radio. I'm Jenn Morgan, and I'm here in Studio 212 at the Soundcasting Network, which is in South Lake Union in Seattle. And today we're going to talk about the importance of emotional tone in communication and how getting it right is the fastest track to elevating your leadership presence in your professional world and gaining respect in your personal life. One of my clients is a very high-profile executive in a firm that is also a very prestigious firm in Seattle. He is great at what he does, but he's super uncomfortable when it comes to networking, especially with that question that everybody doesn't really like to get, what do you do? And so because he performs so well in his job and he has a really solid client base and he looks at his ability to network in relationship to his ability to perform his job, he knows that he can get better. So that's why he would hire somebody like me. Now, so what we're going to talk about, though, is how do we start to make him feel more comfortable at networking events, talking about what he does, and specifically, how do we do that from a personal branding perspective? So first of all, we're just going to simplify communication down to your elevator pitch just so I can give you a more clear idea of what I'm talking about. But this actually pertains to all of your communications. So as we go through this, start to think about when you've been in situations where you felt really uncomfortable and you wish that you would have done it a little bit better, okay? So when it comes to talking about what you do or your elevator pitch, you have two parts. One is what you say, which is the words, and the other is how you say it, which is your emotional tone. Now, your words are very important because first of all, they give you personally clarity, like of what you're trying to do. They focus your energy on what I'm trying to communicate. And that is great, but it's not really what attracts people. What attracts people or repels people is the way you say it or the emotional tone. That sort of vibe that you put out into the world through your communication, through what they see about you, but also through the vibrations of your voice. You can't just send out emotional tone, though, because people would be like, what are you, like a whale? You're like sending out sonar waves? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know if you've seen the movie Finding Dory, where she's talking like a whale and she's like, oh, ah, right? She's like this weird tone, right? That's such an emotional tone. That's kind of like a whale's sonar, whatever. But you can't send that out. You need to have something to wrap it in. You need words that give you context. So what you say is different than how you say it, but separating them apart is really what you do during personal branding, right? What you're doing is looking at what is it we want to communicate, and then how can you communicate it in a very particular way so that you shine. And if you integrate the development of, say, your elevator pitch into your personal brand, what you're actually doing is creating a vocabulary from a third-person perspective of what you do, which changes the context that you have and gives you the ability to be able to pitch to different audiences. Because you're not just having like some canned set of words, you're actually having a concept for the value of what you do that you can change and morph in different situations. So anyways, back to the first step in being able to communicate in a networking situation and not feel uncomfortable is to have the words, right? So that's the first step, and that comes from your value proposition. Now, most people, when they're writing their value propositions, have way too many words, and they really need to simplify it to make it easy for people to have a picture in their mind about what it is you're trying to communicate, right? We can call that positioning. We can call that clarity, but the whole point is to first start with what you do for who, or another way to say that is set the context for how you want people to listen to you. So for an example, personal retreats for professional women, or another example would be project permitting and disputes for land developers. Both of those things say what you do for who. Now, when you get to the next level down in this value proposition, you're starting to differentiate from other people who may offer something similar and start to give us some more sense of what it would be like to work with you. So, for example, personal retreats for professional women begins with our 2-hour spiritual attunement and deep care massage. And then you might end that pitch with something like, so that they can live on purpose and play full out. So there's an actual structure there into how you would communicate that. You're going to use more or less of those words depending upon the situation. So, for example, on stage, you might say the whole thing as one whole pitch. But in a networking situation, it's going to be more conversational. The way that you put it out there is going to depend on the context of the situation. So if you're just having a regular conversation, you might have a 1 or 2 line thing that you say, and then a few other things that you're going to kind of insert in there as you're trying to move the conversation along and you're trying to get to know the other person. So the first step is the words. The second step is how do you say it, which is the emotional tone, which is my focus for today. And I think it's really important that I start with the words piece because I want to remove the words from communication in order to talk about the tone of your communication. Now, in a networking situation, as I said, my client is very confident in his work. He's very secure in his life. So it's not like he is an insecure person at all. It's just he feels uncomfortable in a networking situation. So whenever you're unsure about anything, what you say is going to sound meek and insecure because of how you're feeling, right? You're just not sure. You're not coming from a place of certainty. Or if you're at a networking event and you experience a lot of social anxiety, I tend to find that a lot of social anxiety comes from being very sensitive to other people and other people's energy, but not understanding like how to be okay with it. Like how do you be okay with the fact that other people are upset, or how do you be okay with the fact that maybe somebody wants to sell something to you, right? That's social, all of these things where it's hard to see where people are actually coming from. That makes us feel very anxious because it's like we're supposed to be a certain way, but we're not quite sure what that way is supposed to be. So having the right words will go a long way to ground you in your purpose so that you can have something to say, obviously, but then you can start to focus on other people and not so much on, oh my gosh, what's my name? I forgot my name. One of my clients, you can have all the right words in the world, the perfect pitch written for you, and then still have a hard time saying it. So after we wrote the elevator pitch for my client that I was talking about at the beginning, he was still struggling with saying it because he works with a lot of people who are somewhat egotistical and they're very smart. And this seems like the higher you get in the pecking order, the more you have to act and posture in such a way that proves that you're worth something. And so that can come across very arrogant and egotistical. And if you're a nice person like my client, that might be so off-putting that you would want to be the exact opposite of that. So you don't want to sound pretentious or condescending, although the work that you do is quite amazing, right? So you can find yourself afraid to come across in a certain way. And then what happens when you're afraid to be condescending or arrogant or full of yourself? You will sound apologetic in your tone. Like, is it okay for me to tell you how great I am? And it will be somewhat soft-spoken. And this happens at lots of different levels in the business. This could be somebody who's just starting out in business, is somebody who's really established in their business. If you're wanting people to like you and you see yourself as a likable person who's easy to work with, and you're also really good at what you do, then you care about that social relationship. And so you have maybe experienced a time when people are coming across in a tone that you definitely do not want to come across as. So here's the thing. What you resist persists. So if you're communicating, say in your elevator pitch at a networking event, and you're really afraid to sound pretentious, you're going to either overdo it and come across sounding pretentious because you're faking it till you make it, or you're going to underdo it and try to be more likable, and you're going to be kind of soft-spoken. People might not be able to hear you very well. So I want you to imagine something with me for a second. Think about a person who has a communication style that is repulsive. Like just a person, could be a person in your family, it could be someone that you work with. It's like it's not so much what they say, it's just how they go about saying it. Maybe it's kind of just has this tone of condescension or disrespect or something, and it just gets under your skin. So just think about a person like that for you. And then once you get that person, I want you to think about a person the exact opposite, whose communication style, like they can say the harshest things and they just somehow are received by people. Or they can be very direct in what they're communicating, and where other people might tiptoe around, they just have this sense of polish or precision that's somehow acceptable. So get an idea for who those two people might be for you. They could be somebody famous. They could be somebody that you know. And I want you to practice your elevator pitch as each of those people, right? So let's say that the person that you chose, so I'll just use myself for an example. So what I would like, the worst thing that I could sound would be somebody who talks down to other people, who disrespects other people. Maybe somebody like, I'm losing an actual person. Okay, so there is a person in mind. It's a speaker who I once networked with, and she just, I was approaching her. I thought she was really inspirational, and I thought that it would be really great to for her to know me, because I do great work, and I was very confident how I went up to her, and she just looked at me and just gave me like the most, like, why would you come talk to me sort of conversational tone, right? And I hope that would never be something that I would do, right? So think that's that person for me. And then on the opposite side of that, there's somebody who I think is really, I would never want to sound like a ditzy cheerleader when I talk about what I do, because I'm really confident in what I do, and it is very transformational, and I feel that it's valuable in the world. So I wouldn't want to come like ditzy or like airheadish, right? So those are kind of like the range of the areas that I wouldn't want to be. And then in terms of people who I admire, I like celebrities who sort of have a humble sense about themselves. So like they just did really great, amazing work, but they have a sound to their voice that is, like they're not putting themselves on a huge pedestal, but they're still very confident in what they do. So that's sort of the range of things that I want you to think about for yourself. And then I want you to practice them in that tone. As if you're going to act like you're that person. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. When I do this with my clients, what's really interesting is, so I'll have them do their most condescending tone that they can do. And that's actually really challenging for them. Because one, they don't want to do it. Number two, they don't really used to acting that way on purpose. And it's very, very uncomfortable for them to go to that place. So when they do it, when my clients will do that, they go to that place, they actually just sound more clear and confident, because I'm pushing them over into this range of what we would call arrogance, or, what you would call arrogance, and owning that part of yourself that can be arrogant. I mean, because let's be honest, if you're really good at what you do, there is a place within yourself that thinks you're better than other people. Now, whether or not you want to be taken that way or you actually see it that way is different than being able to tap into the part of yourself that does feel that way. And that's called range, having emotional range. So I'm just gonna try out an example here for you. So I'm gonna do my elevator pitch, the short version of my elevator pitch, in a couple different tones. So maybe it'll give you an example for what I mean. So first I'm gonna do it in a condescending tone. My name is Jenn Morgan, and I empower people to be radically distinct. Okay, and then I'm going to do it like a cheerleader. My name is Jenn Morgan, and I empower people to be radically distinct. And now I'm just going to do it just like Jenn Morgan actually does it. My name is Jenn Morgan, and I empower people to be radically distinct. I think I dropped off a little bit on my distinct there, but can you hear the difference in my emotional tone? Like the first one, my condescending tone, it sounds like I think I'm better than you, right? And then my cheerleader one, it just sounds like you're not going to take me seriously. And then the one in the middle, I hope it comes across like you actually are hearing who Jenn Morgan is. And when we practice these things, what we're doing is actually expanding our emotional range. Authenticity, which is being 100% yourself, starts with being able to accept all of the sides of who you are. Now, when you can accept all of the sides of who you are, you have the ability to use different ones for the task at hand. So, for example, when you're talking to your child because your child did something wrong and you have to make sure that they're clear that it's not okay to do that, you're going to have a different, a stern tone. And you're not going to have that same tone, I hope, when you're talking to, say, your life partner, right? If you had the same tone talking to your life partner that you did with your child, it would have a different effect. So the more range that you have of your self-expression, the more range that you have in your self-expression translate into more authentic representation of yourself. And the way to being able to do that in your communication is to start to look at your communication differently. Not just what am I trying to say, but what am I trying to communicate? Like, what is it that I'm trying to communicate, and what are the words that I want people to I want to wrap around those things. And then secondly, the emotional tone. And what's very challenging about getting the emotional tone right is that you have to have an understanding of the difference between how you think about yourself and how you feel about yourself and what you're trying to do. When you're clear about those things, then you can start to work with the emotional tone. The benefits of personal branding in this situation is that what we're doing is we're organizing these things out, the what, the who, the why of who you are, independent of your job, independent of the situation at hand. And that creates that space between you and the thing you want to do or the thing you want to communicate. And within that space, it's what it's actually doing is giving you an objective perspective of yourself, which gives you the ability to see things more clearly. So just kind of back up a little bit, we were talking about social anxiety. I honestly believe that a lot of social anxiety is coming from you're sensing all of these things around yourself that are intangible. You can't quite put your finger on what they are. And the reason why you can't put your finger on what they are is because you're not used to identifying them within yourself. We live in a culture in which we suppress our emotions, and we basically say that emotions are bad. You're emotional. I can't talk to you right now. You can't be reasonable because you're just being emotional. I mean, it's not personal. It's just business, right? That's the culture that we live in here. And so then what ends up happening is we start to build the way that we interact with each other by suppressing our emotions and then uplifting our logic. So then we get into these arguments, these logical arguments that are very emotional, and these emotional manipulation getting thrown around all over the place. And you're now finding yourself in a social situation with a bunch of people with a bunch of emotions all bottled up inside. And we're feeling all of these things. And the more sensitive you are, the more anxious you're going to feel because people aren't really dealing with it. Okay, it feels like I'm doing group therapy right now. But the point of me saying this is if you feel anxious in networking situations, there's reasons. And the reasons are we're just not clear of what's actually going on. When you create that space between yourself and what it is that you're trying to do, which personal branding really helps you do well, what that does is gives you the ability to perceive things that other people can't perceive because you can first perceive them within yourself. All right. So someone who wants to get better at positioning themselves or get more respect from their peers or get recognized for their leadership, or maybe just want to be appreciated from the loved ones that you have in your life that don't really respect the fact that you're a truth teller. What you really want to do is to work on your personal brand, which what that does is it empowers you to be more polished and precise in your communication. And it elevates your leadership presence and gets you heard and respected because you're understanding the difference between who you are, what you're trying to do, and who other people are. There's a space there. You don't assume that people understand where you're coming from, and you don't assume that people understand the value of what you are trying to communicate. Instead, what you do is you're like, it's my responsibility to organize myself and to send out the right emotional tone, because the right emotional tone is going to attract or repel people to me and my cause. So just to recap what we've talked about, how, personal branding, how it helps you with your communication is that it separates out the what, which is your words and your strategy, and the how, which is your emotional tone, which attracts and repels. It's a self-organization process. Like, organize your mind so that you can organize your communication. And it helps you with self-control in those situations where somebody's coming at you with a tone of disrespect. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, and I have been in them, and many of my clients have been, say, in a boardroom where you challenge somebody, and what comes back at you is not just words, but this tone of like disrespect that gets under your skin, and maybe your face turns inflamed. Well, this could be in a personal relationship you have with somebody. This could be in a professional relationship. But what you've done is you said something that offended or made that person feel threatened in some way. Whether or not that was your fault is beside the point. But what do you do next? Do you match their emotional tone of disrespect and get into an argument? Or do you have an understanding that that person just came at you with an emotional tone, and now you have the ability to manage your brand? You now have the ability to say, okay, that was a tone that was not a tone I want to match because that's not a part of my brand. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch what they just said. I'm going to hear what they said. I'm going to acknowledge what they said, but I'm going to change my tone. And I'm going to come back from a place of acceptance. I'm going to accept the fact that you just disrespected me. Maybe you didn't mean to. I'm hoping that you didn't mean to. But here's what I really meant to say. And in those few seconds, the ability to change your tone and not mirror back that negative tone all comes from you having an understanding of what you're trying to do and the emotional tones that you want to send out about your brand. All right. So this has been Jenn Morgan. I hope that you've learned something today. And if you have, I would love to hear about it. So you could send me an email, j@jennmorgan.com. That's Jenn with 2 N's. And if you like this show, would you please go on over to iTunes and rate and review us so that we can get more people seeing us? That would be so amazing. Also, I think that it would be cool if you tweeted with me on Twitter. I'm at Jenn Morgan Brand. And we have this really cool Instagram that I think you should know about and you should follow and come and see the stuff, because every single day my friend Keith puts out these really cool inspirational things around your personal brand that you just need to have in your feed. That's at Radically Distinct. And I'm also on Facebook at Radically Distinct. So I hope that you have a wonderful week, and till next time, this has been Jenn Morgan on Radically Distinct Radio.